Attention chiropractors, slayers of subluxation, unleashers of the imprisoned impulse. I am Dr. Anthony Pellegrino from ChiroEdge, and welcome to this week's episode of the Chiropractic Research Breakdown, where each week we break down the most relevant chiropractic science and philosophy to empower you with the ammo and certainty necessary to change your community from the inside out. Today, we are closing out Autism Awareness Month. We have one more week, but I think this is going to be the last article, or the only other article we go over, with one of my favorite articles to talk about. And it's probably not for the reasons that you think. Cool. So please stay tuned, because there's some really important elements of critical thought that I want to address and go over for when we review research. And what's good, and what's bad, and what's amazing, and what's not. So this article is from 2006. You may have seen it, because I have seen it spread around. It's called Clinical Efficacy of Upper Cervical versus Full Spine Chiropractic Care on Children with Autism, a randomized clinical trial. Now, we in chiropractic care have so few, in subluxation especially based chiropractic care, we have so few clinical trials that when I see that in an article headline, you know I am going to, and I do, 100% jump for joy. So I did that when I first saw this. And I remember being really confused when I actually read the article. And I sat in Dr. Matthew McCoy's office and asked him questions. And he, of course, just banged his head up against the wall, and we moved forward. Let's jump into this. Autism, basically from their introduction, is a conglomerate, I use that word, of developmental and social behaviors, including but not limited to failure to make eye contact, using facial expressions and body postures and gestures to regulate social interaction. It includes rarely seeking others for comfort and affection. It includes rarely initiating interactive play with others. It includes rarely offering comfort to others or responding to others' distress or happiness. It involves rarely greeting others. It involves not building peer friendships in terms of mutual sharing of interests, activities, and emotions despite ample opportunities. It involves abnormalities in communication and lack of social usage of language. It involves restrictive, repetitive, and stereotyped patterns of behaviors. So these doctors, these upper cervical people, wanted to look at and compare the clinical efficacy of upper cervical care versus full spine in children with autism. Why? I don't I don't know. I wish that we just wanted to look at, chiropractic care and maybe put some money towards randomized controlled trials that look at chiropractic care in autism, because we know that it works and we should just prove it. But whatever, that's their mindset. They got stuff to sell. They got seminars to sell. So I get it. But also I want to rip what's left of my hair out. So we have 14 children under chiropractic care at Kentuckiana Children's Center. Can we just stop for a second and talk about the name of this children's center? Have you heard a better name than Kentuckiana? And yes, I looked it up, and this children's center is on the border of, you guessed it, Kentucky and Indiana. Kentuckiana Children's Center. Oh my God, Children's Center. That made my day. Kentuckiana Children's Center. If you live near the border of Kentucky and Indiana, kudos for having a place called Kentuckiana Children's Center, because that is hilarious. Moving on. They looked at the clinical effects of full spine adjustments on these children. Now, they had 14 children under care in this children's center under chiropractic care, which they had kids in a children's center for kids with autism under chiropractic care, which is awesome. And they were under full spine care previous to this study, which adds to my confusion, and we'll get to that. So what they did is they had 15 kids and one dropped out. They put 7 into a group that was continuing full spine, I guess, and then 7 into a group that was upper cervical care, specifically Atlas orthogonal. So, or they put 8 kids there and one chose to drop out. So if you guys don't know anything about Atlas orthogonal, I'm actually a big fan of the technique. It involves pre-adjustment and post-adjustment supine comparative leg checks. It includes spinal palpation, a percussion adjusting instrument. So I'm just going to read to you what's involved in their subluxation analysis and adjustment here from the paper, because it's a lot and I didn't want to write it all down. So I'm just going to read to you from the paper. I'm going to do it word for word because it's exhausting. It's exhausting, their analysis. And I think that we should know what it takes, because I think they're being slightly specific, and that makes me kind of happy. All right. So here we are. The selected method for upper cervical adjustment used in this study was Atlas orthogonal. This technique utilizes pre-adjustment and post-adjustment supine comparative leg checks, spinal palpation, and a percussion adjusting instrument. The term orthogonal is an adjective meaning having to do with or involving right angles or perpendicular. Bringing the atlas to a right angle to the spine is the target of Atlas orthogonal adjustment. Great. To attain this, the technique recommends 4 pre-adjustment cervical x-rays and 2 post-adjustment x-rays to be taken immediately after the first adjustment in the cervical area. The x-ray views are lateral cervical, A to P open mouth, nasium, and vertex. Individually, line analysis used on these films to specifically measure and analyze the misalignment of the occipital-atlanto-axial joints. Post x-rays are taken to see what changes have been made and or to make any further corrections to the vectors of the adjustment. Ultimately, in its position, the cranium should be vertical, the atlas vertebra should be leveled, and the cervical spine should be vertical. All right, you following so far? Examination procedures also included supine comparative leg length assessments. It is recommended that the patient be positioned supine so the heels off their feet are off the inferior end of the table, approximately 6 inches. A leg check grid is attached to the bottom of the AO leg check table. The legs are always measured in neutral position and not touched. The supine leg check comparison is performed both before and after adjustment. Scanning palpation is a vital part of Atlas orthogonal evaluation. It is a manual tactile cervical spine examination for objective findings of such conditions as muscular spasms, muscle contractions, edema, and osseous protuberances. Subjective findings will be extreme tenderness, pain, hypersensitivity, hyperirritability, and neurological insult in the positive palpated areas. Findings are graded according to the degree of severity. This procedure is conducted immediately before and after spinal adjustment. So that's the evaluation. Let's go on to the adjustment itself. The percussion adjustment instrument is used in AO technique. The patient is placed on his or her side with head support at 4 inches below the mastoid. A metal stylus is placed between the mastoid and the ramus of the mandible. An adjustment and impulse imparted to the stylus by a plunger that excites a compressional wave of the stylus is then delivered to the patient. The patient stylus interface, a portion of the wave energy is transmitted to the patient, and the portion is reflected back to the plunger. Former portion of energy is enough to direct the atlas vertebra to move its normal orthogonal position. This may be demonstrated and recorded by video fluoroscopy. So that's a lot. You might not believe in the percussion instrument, but it doesn't matter because they take post x-rays. So whether or not you believe that that little wave is going to do anything, they null and void because they check and they prove it, which is awesome. Cool. We like that. After initial ATEC scoring, which they use the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist, and we used this intake paperwork for anybody who says that they are on our parents say that they are on the autism spectrum. You can just go download it right online. It's called the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist. It's from the Autism Research Institute. It's free. You can get it there. You can submit findings. It's really good to be able to actually quantify those subjective changes from mom and dad in a clinical way and be able to later publish research, which is what they attempted to do here. All right. So they took those 8 kids, or 15 kids, and here's part of the issue is they were already under chiropractic care and they just added in upper cervical for some of them and then not. And then they looked at it over a 3-month period. They saw them 2 times a week and they said, how did the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist change? How did these scores change? So there's a couple points here. Number 1, if you do Atlas orthogonal and you see children on the spectrum, please call me and help me, because we see tons of kids with autism here. And I've always kind of remembered when I took Dr. Drew Rubin's pediatric ICPA seminar, and I remember a Larry Webster quote that he said that I loved and I held with my entire life, which is, kids are easy to adjust. They're just hard to catch. And oh my goodness, do I feel that is true? I love serving kids on the spectrum. It's amazing to see them change, but I could not fathom, I literally couldn't fathom doing this level of evaluation, doing this adjustment and keeping them still long enough to have a percussion waveform go and reset their upper cervical spine. Like, just because I can't imagine it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. But like, when I read that, I feel like there's something that I'm missing. Like, we're really grab and go. We do a thorough evaluation. But like we're kind of sometimes adjusting kids on the hallways, like lifting them up, like they're in the air. Like I couldn't imagine laying somebody on their right side and making them sit there for 5 minutes and then doing a very specific evaluation after and a very specific leg check where they lay perfectly still and we use a grid. Like that is kind of outside of my realm of what we can actually do. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but I please call me if you're able to do that, or just shoot me an email if you're listening to the audio podcast afterwards, the Chiropractic Research Breakdown. So over this time period, what they found is they were super pumped up because they did the autism treatment evaluation checklist. And what they found was that on average, the upper cervical group had a 32% improvement in the scores, the autism scores with the checklist, and full spine had a 19% improvement. Awesome. They're fired up about that. So of course they're concluding that upper cervical care is better than full spine, especially at least for these kids. And I completely reject that conclusion, not because I don't believe in I love upper cervical care. I love specific care, but this is what we need to look at in terms of when we, right, if we are going to hold ourselves to a certain standard, right? If we're going to hold ourselves to a certain standard, if we're going to go and battle anti-subluxation, if we're going to battle metapractors, if we're going to hold ourselves politically, we can't use articles like this to justify our cause. We can't use research like this to justify our cause. We can't just go share this all over Facebook and say, look at this, upper cervical is great, chiropractic is great, because there's just too many holes. There's Swiss cheese. I mean, there's more than Swiss cheese here, right? Like this is Game of Thrones, like White Walker Dragon just took down the wall and now we're marching south. Like it's that level of hole in the arguments, and we need to address them and understand them. And that's why one of the reasons that I hope you listen. Okay. First off, guys, all of these kids were under full spine care prior to the study. Okay. They were they didn't say how long, right? So they didn't say how long they had been under care prior, but they did say that everybody was getting adjusted prior. So with one of the groups, you just continued full spine, and the other one, you added an upper cervical. So we're not actually comparing the efficacy of upper cervical chiropractic care or of chiropractic care to a control group. The control group is full spine, which is still chiropractic. So if anything, like there's no conclusion that can be drawn that is good for chiropractic there. There's nothing that can be drawn because we haven't done enough to prove that chiropractic at all in general helps, right? We see it every day in our offices, but we haven't done enough to publish research on enough randomized control trials to actually prove that what we do is good for a regular control group without chiropractic. So our conclusions here mean nothing. And I have a comment on here that I just ruined it was from last season, right? Somebody just said I ruined Game of Thrones for them. It was from last season. I'm sorry. It took like 4 years for this season to come out. You were behind the 8 ball. You're lost, man. I'm sorry. Just get ahead, catch up. So moving forward there, we haven't done enough to actually like prove that chiropractic in general actually even helps. Never mind comparing upper cervical to full spine. So especially when that person had already been under full spine care for a long period of time. The next issue here, and honestly, the more important issue is that, okay, so we have people like, first of all, really small sample size, right? So we have people who saw better results with upper cervical care than people who saw results with full spine care. And they say that, and they have the numbers, 32% versus 19%. And if you were to get somebody, like, let's be real, in chiropractic college, we don't really learn how to critically evaluate research too well. And if we publish something like this and we run with this and we share it around, we're just saying, hey, individuals saw 32% improvement like with upper cervical care. But then we hand it to somebody who's looking to counter our argument, and they say, well, what was your statistical significance? In any randomized control trial or randomized clinical trial, the whole point in doing it is to find, you guys may have heard of a p-value, and we want a p-value of less than 0.05. The whole point in that, in doing this type of research, is to show that the results that you got are not by chance. Which, if you could ask anybody, like, why, we might talk to a metapractor and they might say something like, you could ask them, oh, well, why do I see all these changes in my practice? right? And they could be like, well, it's probably just the placebo, which is bull, you know? But the only thing that can prove that is to have a measurement of statistical significance. So if we don't mention that it didn't only happen by chance, then it means nothing. So I understand it's a really small sample size, but literally, like, these results don't mean anything without the mention of statistical significance. Now, if you're a scientist and you're a researcher, I believe it's ethically responsible. You're ethically responsible to publish your results as they are, because it's not about, research is not about proving your point. It's about finding the truth. Okay? So if you ran that analysis, if you ran that statistical analysis and found that it wasn't statistically significant, that needs to be mentioned. You can go ahead and say why you think that is in your discussion section, where you say, hey, it wasn't statistically significant, but we think that's because of small sample size. It wasn't statistically significant, but we think that's because we compared to full spine and not to a regular control group, and full spine saw improvements as well. So, like, while upper cervical was better, it didn't actually show a difference because both of them improved. Like, you can put that in your discussion section, but it needs to be there. If you didn't run that analysis whatsoever, you just threw away whatever money was taken to run this study. You literally threw it away because it means nothing. And if you did run that analysis and you found that it wasn't statistically significant, I believe as though, and you didn't publish that, I believe that that is ethically irresponsible. So I'm sorry if you were an author on this paper, and I really do appreciate it. I love Atlas Orthogonal. I love a lot of the research that that community has put out. They put out some good stuff. I love taking care of children on the autism spectrum. Please, guys, if you're taking care of kids this way, teach me your ways. But like, if we're gonna demand, if we're gonna hold our ground, guys, against the people who are inevitably gonna comment on videos like this and talk smack when you talk about the physiology of subluxation, right? If we're gonna effectively combat that, we need to also hold ourselves to the highest standard possible, because our communities deserve it. I believe that our communities deserve it. We know chiropractic works. We in ourselves don't have that much research, and that's really unfortunate, guys. And I mean, participate in your ICPA PBRNs, please. Like, compile your own research, publish your case studies, use something like the Autism Treatment Evaluation Checklist, or Beck's Anxiety Inventory, or Beck Depression Inventory, and say, hey, the last 30 people that came into my office with depression over a 6-month period, this is the improvement in Beck Depression Inventory. I would love to see that study, right? Do that stuff for your practice, do that stuff for your community. But like, let's just do better, guys, because our community deserves it. Our politics deserve it. Anyway, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news or put you in a bad mood today. I really do appreciate all of you guys. I do appreciate those of you who care about this type of stuff. I appreciate those of you guys who challenge me and what I say, although sometimes I think that you're a little silly in the way you go about it, because you push me to do better and you drive me to be real. And when I look at something that I think is bull, to actually go over it. All right? So with that, Dr. Anthony from ChiroEdge, and this was another episode of the Chiropractic Research Breakdown. Thank you guys for listening. Go slay some subluxations. Join us on the Subluxation Slayers Facebook group, which is awesome. I love you all.